Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Uru Shimbwe Co-op Wash Process Tanzania from Sweet Bloom Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And Sweet Bloom, based out of Lakewood, Colorado, and in our most recent Sweet Bloom review, I stated that I oftentimes feel Sweet Bloom does a better job with their less common coffee origins than they do with some of their bigger coffee origins. So the entire reason for the purchase of these Sweet Bloom coffees was this Tanzanian right here, as this is an opportunity for me to do my first ever Tanzanian coffee review on this channel. With that being said, going into this, I'm not a stranger to Tanzanian coffees. I've had quite a number of Tanzanian coffees throughout my life, so this is just an opportunity for me to finally discuss that, as well as test out my theory pertaining to Sweet Bloom. This right here is day 18 of this coffee. And recipe we have for Sweet Bloom is a 16.671 water to coffee ratio brewed at 204 degrees Fahrenheit. Liked this one better through the Chemex as well. Now, Sweet Bloom is a light medium American for the roast profile. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. So day 6, first impression, and it was vintage Sweet Bloom even for a first impression, as the cup was relatively sweet and slightly tart in a darker berry sense. Cup was really radiating a sugary finish with an initial strong dark fruit forward cup, and it was quite pleasant. And I've said before that Sweet Bloom oftentimes doesn't give off the best first impression. It's usually thereafter that I'm enjoying the cup a lot more. So it was a quite pleasant first impression, and I thought there was quite a bit of potential in this cup. Day 8, another pretty solid day for it overall. More classic sweetness from the cup and a fair bit of sugar-like sweetness. A slight bit of an improvement, and that's going to be a theme throughout this video, is that we're going to see a slight bit of improvement day by day, and nothing drastic, which oftentimes happens for Sweet Bloom. I think if I was expecting maybe the biggest change between the first day and the second day trying it, and I didn't necessarily experience that, just a slight increase, so we were going to see what was going to continue to happen with this cup. Day 10 ran it through the automatic coffee maker, and not quite as good in this sense, but it really does highlight a lot of the tart, darker berry components from the cup. Sweetness was slightly toned down in this sense, but it was well-rounded overall. And that slightly toned down sweetness is actually going to be a recurring theme throughout this video as well, because I couldn't help but shake the feeling that this one wasn't quite as sweet as a lot of other Sweet Bloom coffees, which is interesting considering that they have two kind of really sugary-like flavor notes listed on this cup, on this bag. But let's continue. Day 11, dark tart berries once again, but a bit of this kind of citric-like finish in the cup. It's reminiscent of an unripened blackberry at times. The cup is still pretty sweet in general with a lot of bright sugary components to it, but as mentioned, quite a number of sugary flavor notes listed on this bag. Day 13, cup remains consistent with a slight bit of improvement day by day. Cup still radiates a really dark berry and a secondary almost grapefruit-like citrus, and that's the best kind of citric component I could pull up for this cup of coffee, and it was most pronounced through the V60, so that's why maybe I liked it a little bit more through the Chemex, as it kind of dissipated that pretty strong citrus. That being said, it was still there regardless of which brew method I went. Not quite as sweet as other Sweet Bloom coffees, but still a fair amount, and that's something that I really wanted to highlight and emphasize and make sure to put it in the notes. Day 15, more slight improvements in the cup, but nothing worth noting. Still more of those darker tart berries. And day 17, final notes we have, cup is definitely the best it's been to this point, as it's getting increasingly sweeter with a bunch of dark sugar components to complement the darker berry. Coffee feels almost Kenyan-like with a fair bit of savoriness. So I was saying more of the savoriness. And when brewed through the V60, those were some things that were really worth noting, was a bit more savoriness. It almost felt like a Kenyan cup of coffee, and a bit more of that kind of citric, like grapefruit-like component to the cup. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we were getting. All right, and I know we have a couple level 4s, but let me jump right through that sweetness, because the sweetness is at a level 3, and I really wanted to emphasize that throughout, because almost all Sweet Bloom coffees I've ever reviewed on this channel typically minimum get a level 4 for that. So having that slightly toned down into level 3 was to just kind of emphasize the fact that this one wasn't quite as sweet as I'm typically experiencing from a Sweet Bloom coffee. That being said, it is on the higher side of level 3, and I was really curious to see if maybe here on day 18, later in the coffee, that might have improved, but I still think it fits perfectly in that level 3 mark. It's definitely on the higher side of the level 3, but I don't think it could justify that level 4 in the same way so many other Sweet Bloom coffees have. Let's run through those level 4s though. Berry fruit, level 4, been harping on that a lot. Yes, very tart, dark berry, common, most pronounced thing throughout the entire time drinking this cup of coffee, not surprising there. And then the finish level 4 and the cleanliness at a level 4, pretty clean cup of coffee and has a pretty lasting finish to the cup of coffee as well. Other things worth noting, acidity level 3, that's also a little higher than I typically experience from Sweet Bloom coffees, so that was also worth noting. And I think one more thing I want to note is that savoriness, because I said that brewed through the V60, it's kind of Kenyan-like, so I would actually raise that up, but I wouldn't sacrifice it for the cleanliness. It's still a relatively clean cup of coffee. Body on the lower side, I mean, it is brewed through the Chemex, so that's not too surprising there. But for the most part, I think this tasting wheel actually does change quite a bit with the V60, and the cup of coffee itself hasn't necessarily changed too much. I feel like this would actually be pretty in line with the way it was from the first time I tried it. So very consistent coffee throughout the time drinking it. All right, my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I know going into this that there are two coffee roasters I am highly critical of, and I just do more thorough assessments of, and those are both Sweet Bloom and Manhattan, and those are because those are the two I kind of have my name on, the ones that I rave about so highly and have so many positive things to say about them. So when a cup of coffee like this, and the Ecuador doesn't necessarily hit the mark for me, I want that kind of noted, because even though this coffee might not be my favorite Sweet Bloom coffee, I still find it better than most of what I drink from a lot of other coffee roasters. So I'm just going to say that, because this one right here was an interesting cup of coffee. It has both Kenyan-like as well as Rwandan-like characteristics, which isn't surprising because Tanzania borders both of those countries, and this particular farm is pretty close to the Kenyan border, so it makes a lot of sense. And I think having those two kind of traits to this cup of coffee didn't necessarily make it my favorite, but even then there were some things I really liked. I just had such high expectations for this cup of coffee going into it that it just didn't live up to those expectations, which is definitely going to happen for probably most of the coffees that most people actually drink. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, if you really like those kind of darker tart berry components that come from Kenyan coffees, I feel like this is actually a really good fit for you, because this one just radiated so many Kenyan characteristics for me, especially through the V60. So I feel like as a result, you would really enjoy those aspects of this cup of coffee, and that's kind of the best fit I could find for something like this. I think I'll leave this review at that though. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee or anything else from Sweet Bloom, would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it, or them as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And this right here has been a review of the Uru Shimbwe Co-op, Wash Process Tanzania from Sweet Bloom Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.